Nearly a decade after the third game came out on Wii U, Pikmin 4 has finally been released into the world. I'm so glad we've gotten a new entry in this amazing series, on a console where it might actually have a chance at big success. I may not be an expert on Pikmin, but I've really fallen in love with the charm and addictive gameplay of these games, and Pikmin 4 has been the only thing on my mind since it came out. I think there are a lot of expectations for this game since it's been such a long road to get here, and today I want to talk about whether or not the game lives up to the hype and accomplishes what it needs to. Now right off the bat, I just want to say that I think this game is fantastic. It's visually gorgeous, has super fun and engaging gameplay, and even brings a lot of new quality of life improvements that make the experience smoother overall. Not all of the changes and new additions are perfect, but this game is a more than worthy entry into the series and is absolutely worth your time, whether you're a longtime fan or a slightly interested outsider looking in. Playing through it has been so much fun, and I want to share my personal thoughts on its many strengths as well as a few small weaknesses. Let's get into it. Pikmin 4 brings a lot of new changes to the core gameplay of Pikmin, which had remained pretty unchanged until now. One of the biggest changes is the ability to fully control the camera and rotate it around to get a much better view of the environment. I think this is a major upgrade and makes the game so much better and more immersive. The scale of the world feels a lot larger and more threatening with this new perspective, and although it can be a bit clunky here and there when the camera gets caught on objects around you, at any time you can simply pan the camera down to get a more classic overhead view. This is a perfect new change because it creates a fresh new experience while not erasing the previous one, so hopefully everyone can view the world of Pikmin the way they want to. In the opening hours of the game, there's a whole lot more talking than usual for Pikmin, which I'm kind of mixed on. On one hand, I think it made me feel more connected to the characters over time, but there is a lot of interrupting the gameplay to explain basic stuff, which can get old fast. I love how many different characters and side missions there are, but the first few hours especially can feel pretty slow. I think this is obviously to try and help newcomers to the series get a grasp on all the different mechanics and world building, but returning players might just want to skip most of it. You can quickly skip through a lot of it if you want to, but I do think the overall replay value has been affected a bit by the more intense tutorial feel of the first few hours. But later in the game, I actually grew to really enjoy talking to my team and all the civilians I rescued. You actually play as your own customizable avatar this time, which is really cool, but it does mean that you're pretty much a silent protagonist. So the supporting cast is even more important than usual, and I think they do a great job. They all have funny and unique personalities, making them lots of fun to talk to. This time you have a home base area you return to at the end of each day and in the morning before you depart, which is a really great addition. I always love these sorts of locations that grow and expand as you progress through the game, and for some reason I just love the early morning atmosphere when you first wake up and start the day. I really enjoy just wandering around and spending time here, and it gives you a moment to breathe in between intense days of exploration. Rescuing new characters and unlocking new features like the Piklopedia is so much fun and gives the world that more immersive feel. A lot of them even give you side objectives like exploring 100% of an area or growing your total Pikmin count, which is great. It feels like you're building a community of new friends, which is a very different atmosphere than the lonely isolation of the first game. Of course, part of me misses that more isolated feel the first three games had, but game franchises always evolve and change over time, and I think the Rescue Command Post fits very well into the series as an evolution of what came before. However, I do miss this specific shot from the first three, where you watch your spaceship and Onion fly into space against a gorgeous sunset backdrop. In Pikmin 4, you pretty much stay on the planet itself for most of the game, which is cool in its own way. I felt more immersed into the world since the crew didn't go into space at the end of each day. It gives the planet a more permanent and impactful presence, but I still think I prefer the way it was before, staring out into space and recounting the events of the day. I feel like the usual Pikmin vibes have been changed a bit by removing this iconic ending to the day, but it's probably not that big of a deal. Another big change is the way targeting works. Now, I only ever played Pikmin games with the Wii Remote and Nunchuck, and I really enjoyed the precision that was offered with those controls, so I was a little scared of using traditional button controls in 4, but the new system hardly requires precision at all. Once you look in the general direction of an object or creature, you automatically lock on and target it perfectly. This streamlines the gameplay a lot and means you spend way less time aiming, which could be seen as a good or bad thing depending on the player. In some ways, I think the gameplay is even more fun now that I can just blitz around instantly doing everything I want to, and I can probably get more done in a shorter amount of time. But it does feel like some of the strategy was lost, and there were even a few times where the automatic lock-on got really annoying. If there are lots of enemies or objects around you, it can be really annoying to try and force the targeting system to point at what you want it to. It was most bad for me in the caves, but it worked pretty well in the larger overworld areas. There's also this little forced pause after throwing the exact number of Pikmin for a task, which is a nice way to know you've thrown the right amount. I'd love to hear what a Pikmin veteran thinks about this new system, as I haven't fully figured out what I think of it yet. A lot of the decisions in this game seem to try and make it more approachable to beginners, and I'm guessing the new auto-targeting helps a lot since it's way less likely you misthrow Pikmin. Like a lot of the other new changes in this game, the new auto-targeting system isn't inherently good or bad, it's just different. I'm sure some people will prefer it and some people won't. I can appreciate how it simplifies the gameplay myself, but I'll also always still enjoy the way it used to be when I replay the older games. The new enemy designs and boss fights are terrific, which shouldn't be a surprise for this series. Of course, there's plenty of returning enemies, and they're great as well. But the most exciting thing was discovering all the new terrifying creatures that will gladly kill all of your Pikmin. I won't show too many of the new enemies or boss fights so you can find them for yourself, so just know there's lots to look forward to. And for those of you worrying that this game will be way too easy, there are plenty of difficult challenges that will totally wipe out your Pikmin squad. It never reaches Pikmin 2 levels of challenge, but there are some pretty hard caves later on. One of the big new features of this game is Night Mode, where you venture out into the world at night to collect special extract. This mode has a totally different feel than normal exploration. It's more like a tower defense horror game. The normal Pikmin gameplay is somehow even more stressful and scary in these levels, but it's also really fun. It's surprisingly scary the way the music builds when enemies get close to the Lumiknull. You get to team up with Glow Pikmin, a new type of Pikmin that only come out at night or in caves. It's really cool how they just instantly teleport to you after spawning. It makes the night missions just a bit easier to manage. I actually really like the difficulty of these missions, and they're a nice balance to the normal gameplay. Plus you're motivated to complete them so you can heal the leafy citizens you rescue. Caves return from Pikmin 2, although they're a bit less torturous this time around. I'm 90% sure the caves aren't randomly generated anymore, so they actually feel like they're well designed and have a point to the layout. They also feel a bit more natural and less blocky, which I like. A huge new quality of life improvement is that you can select a specific floor to return to after leaving, which eliminates a massive chunk of annoyance that Pikmin 2 had. If you can't tell, I wasn't exactly the biggest fan of caves in Pikmin 2, but they're much improved this time around and a lot more enjoyable. The concept of diving into caves is great, and I feel like they finally captured more of its potential with less frustration. Of course the caves are full of treasure to collect, but there's also lost stranded survivors down here that give you a more tangible motivation to explore. Time still comes to a total stop in the caves, which I'm still mixed on. I don't think you spend as much time in caves as you did in the second game, but you can still spend a lot of hours down here, and since there's no time crunch you can spend even more time. Some of the caves are these special Dandori challenges where you face off against a CPU to try and collect more stuff than them during a strict time limit. I think the gameplay of these sections is pretty fun once you get the hang of it, but it can sometimes feel visually out of place a bit in the mostly natural world around you. And the split screen in the versus mode seems really pointless in a single player story mode, and was weirdly disorienting to me at first. I found these Dandori challenges more frustrating than fun sometimes since you start out being totally unfamiliar with the layout of the levels, and they feel kind of disjointed from the game as a whole. But they can be fun if I'm in the right mood. And yeah, I know it's just a Dandori skill issue. Overall, I think I prefer the surface exploration and the strategy of working around your time limit. But I can't deny that the caves have been hugely improved and add even more content to interact with over the course of the game. As much as I love Pikmin 3, it did feel a bit less grand in scope without caves, so I'm glad they came back. Most of the changes I've mentioned so far have been made to simplify the gameplay and make it more approachable, but there is some new stuff that actually makes the core gameplay loop more complex and interesting, specifically the new items and upgrades. Now you can collect this stuff called raw materials, which you can use to build bridges and climbable walls, but also work as a form of currency that lets you buy upgrades and items, which makes for a really rewarding gameplay loop. The upgrades are the coolest thing, as they give your character permanent upgrades that allow for faster and more efficient gameplay, like a faster walking speed or becoming fire resistant. And there are lots of useful items you can use like healing items, and I actually really like the change that you just throw bombs yourself instead of making a Pikmin do it. All of the upgradable stuff is amazing, and constantly gives you little goals to work towards. And I can't believe I've made it this far without mentioning Ochi, your new dog-like companion. Ochi changes the flow of gameplay a lot, acting as a sort of second captain in some ways, as well as being a new form of transportation. He can attack, carry stuff back to the Onion, and while you ride on him, all of your Pikmin hop on his back so you don't lose track of anyone. Plus he can even jump, which is super fun and even adds a bit of platforming into the mix. I stay on Ochi's back at pretty much all times as I'm always scared I'll leave some Pikmin behind when they get stuck on a corner or something, so being able to see all my Pikmin with me on screen at once is great. And Ochi has upgradable skills as well, so he can carry more, swim, or learn how to self-heal. I think Ochi is a great inclusion overall, and I loved what he added to the experience. I already mentioned the Glow Pikmin, but the other major new Pikmin type is the Ice Pikmin, which are a really unique new type. They might seem overpowered at first since they can freeze enemies and stop them from attacking, but if you destroy a frozen enemy they simply explode into nothing, so you don't get the benefits from taking them back to the onion. I actually think this is a good thing because it stops you from using them non-stop, and only act as a last resort for a super tough enemy. They can also freeze water so you can cross with the other Pikmin types, but you have to leave them in the water for it to stay frozen, so your total Pikmin count will be a lot smaller. And there's new ice walls that only they can destroy, so they're required to be used around in the puzzles and traversal. Personally, I think these little guys are decently well balanced, but once again I'm far from an expert on Pikmin. Of course, there's also every other type of Pikmin from previous games that return here, which is great. This means there are a whole lot of Pikmin types this time around, so to stop things from getting too crazy you can only have 3 types of Pikmin out in the overworld at once, which makes sense but feels a bit too limiting. I would have liked it if the limit was like 5 or something, as reaching a certain obstacle and realizing I don't have the right type of Pikmin is pretty annoying. Although it could be looked at as an extra layer of required strategy since you have to plan out your route with the correct types of Pikmin. I can't really speak to the balancing of every Pikmin type, but I thought they were all useful in their own way and lots of fun to use in gameplay. The music in this game is really good, although there aren't quite as many memorable tunes as past games had, but it's all pleasant to listen to and adds to the atmosphere. I mean, it's Pikmin music, so of course it's good. The main theme especially is terrific, and the sound design is amazing as always. This game is so satisfying to listen to. Also, I want to emphasize one last time just how beautiful this game is visually. I was constantly blown away by how pretty the world looks. Easily one of the best looking games on Switch. And the last thing I want to mention is the apparent timeline reset that the story did. If you're unaware of what I mean by that, basically the first 3 games had a pretty straightforward timeline of events and characters that was easy to follow. But in Pikmin 4 it seems like none of that has really been kept. Olimar is back, but his backstory doesn't match the one from Pikmin 1 and 2. I don't think this is too big of a deal, as the new characters and story moments are enough to stand by themselves as a strong Pikmin story, but I do wish they could have kept the normal timeline and linked this game back to the first 3 a bit more. But it's really a small complaint about this overall incredible game. I absolutely loved my time with Pikmin 4. It feels like a true evolution of the series with tons of new ideas and mechanics, bringing in old stuff from across the past games to make one fantastic new game. There is just so much content packed into Pikmin 4, with so many systems and ideas to play around with and highly detailed treasure to collect. From the upgrades to night mode missions, there's so much to enjoy. The changes make the gameplay feel pretty different at times, and it all depends on the individual player if they like those changes or not. For the most part, I think all the new stuff is great, even though there are a few things that I'll miss from the older games. It's probably a little too early to say for sure, but I have a good feeling that Pikmin 4 will end up being my personal favorite from the whole series. It just does so much right and has a ridiculous amount of content to enjoy that I think it's at the top of my list. Honestly, I'm just glad there's new Pikmin stuff to talk about and discuss at all, since it's been so long since this series has felt new and fresh again. I'm not entirely sure what the rest of the world thinks about this one, so I'd love to hear your thoughts on all the new stuff this game has. Whether you like all of it or not, leave a comment sharing your opinion on Pikmin 4. This year has been fantastic for Nintendo so far. This game is yet another one that I absolutely loved. Anyways, that's about all I've got for this video. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll see ya in the next one.